The woman with silver hands, the sun was still low over Chennai, casting a soft orange light over the narrow streets where bicycles rang and vendors shouted their morning prices. Life was waking up slowly, the air thick with spice and possibility. But inside one small, modest home, a woman had already been working for hours. Her name was Meenakshi. She was 80 years old, with joints that cracked like dry wood and a back that curved from decades of bending over floors, scrubbing pots, and carrying other people's burdens. Yet her spirit had never bent. Every morning before the sun could beat down with its usual fire, she would wrap her thinning silver hair into a tight bun, fold the end of her cotton sari around her waist, and set off to clean the homes of others to the world. She was just a cleaner, a maid, forgotten by most. Invisible to many, but in her heart, she remembered everything, especially the boy with big eyes who once lived in the little blue house at the corner of the lane. The boy was curious, polite, always quiet, but always watching. He never shouted like the other children or threw stones at her like some cruel kids did. No, this boy had offered her water on hot days, brought her guavas from the tree, and once, when she slipped on the wet tiles and hurt her ankle, he had run barefoot all the way to the doctor's clinic to get help. His name was Sundar.mee Anakesh, and cleaned his family's house for almost 15 years. She had watched him grow from a shy little child into a teenager with dreams too big for their neighborhood. And then one day he was gone America. They said college, they said Google, they whispered then. Silence years passed, decades even. And still Meenakshi cleaned houses. She had no children of her own. Her husband had died when she was young, and she never remarried. Her world was a series of doorsteps, mops, and quiet evenings. Her hands had turned silver with age, her knees stiff from service. Yet no one had ever come back for her. Not even Sundar, or so, she thought. That morning she was at a new house. A rich one. She didn't like going to the big gated homes often, but this one had called through a reference, and she needed the money for her medicine. Her heart wasn't doing so well lately. Sometimes she had to sit down just to catch her breath. Still, she never missed a day of work. She knocked on the large door and waited. A man in a suit opened it. He didn't smile, just nodded and stepped aside. The kitchen and living room, he said without looking at her. Me in ake. I. She didn't expect kindness anymore, just money. The house was beautiful. Polished floors, modern furniture, everything smelled of lemon and luxury. She set her bucket down and began scrubbing. But as she bent over the tiles, something strange happened. A voice came from behind. Soft, curious. Excuse me. What is your name? Meenakshi turned around slowly, wiping her hands on her sari. A tall man stood there, wearing a simple shirt, no shoes, and a look that wasn't arrogant like the others. There was something familiar in his eyes. Something warm. Meenakshi, she said softly, I came to clean. The man stared at her, blinked, tilted his head like a boy would when confused. Meenakshi, auntie? Her breath caught. No one had called her that in years. He took a slow step forward. You used to work at my house, the blue one, with the guava tree? Her hands trembled. Her eyes searched his face. Sundar. She whispered. He nodded. Her knees buckled. He rushed to catch her before she fell. That moment, two souls, a generation apart, frozen in time, felt like something out of a dream. Sundar gently helped her to a nearby chair and poured her a glass of water with his own hands. His eyes, once filled with ambition, were now glassy with emotion. You're still working? He asked, voice heavy. She smiled faintly. Work keep me alive. You should be resting. You should be enjoying life. After all I've done. She chuckled weakly. I clean floors, beta. Nothing more. No, Sundar said, his voice firm now. You gave me more than you know. You were the first person to teach me what kindness looks like when no one's watching. Meenakshi looked down, embarrassed. Do you know, he continued, I still remember the way you packed my lunch when Amma was busy. The way you pray for me before my exams. The way you always save the ripest mango for me. Her hand shook now, not from work, but from memory. I never forgot you. He said softly. Just then, a voice from the hallway interrupted them. Sir, your meeting with the tech investors is in 10 minutes. Sundar stood, but his eyes didn't. Leave her. Cancel it, he said. The assistant blinked. Sir? Cancel everything for today. Meenakshi stared at him, confused. No. Don't miss her work for me. I'm just a maid. No, he said again, more gently now. Your family? And for the first time in years, Meenakshi cried, not from pain, not from exhaustion, but from being seen, from being remembered, and then suddenly she clutched her chest, her face went pale. Sundar, She gasped. He rushed to her side as she collapsed onto the floor, her breath shallow and hands trembling. He shouted for help, but deep inside, as he held her fragile body and called her name again and again, Sundar knew something wasn't right, and he feared, He may have found her too late, the woman in room 12. Ambulance raced through the early morning streets of Chennai, its siren cutting through the air like a cry of urgency. Inside, Sundar sat, gripping Meenakshi's frail hand, his fingers trembling against her paper-thin skin. She was barely conscious now, her breaths shallow, her eyes fluttering in and out of awareness. He kept whispering her name, as if saying it could somehow anchor her to this world, could somehow remind her not to let go. Meenakshi, auntie. Please stay with me, please. Memories swirled in Sundar's mind like a storm. The blue-tiled kitchen where she used to hum old Tamil songs while scrubbing pots. The way her laughter would echo when his mother teased her. The afternoon she spent running after him with food because he refused to stop studying long enough to eat. She was never just a maid. She was the quiet foundation holding their home together. And he had left. He had gone away chasing dreams in Silicon Valleys, while she had stayed behind in the dust, in the silence. He felt ashamed. How could he have let this happen? When they reached the hospital, everything moved, fast voices shouting, wheels screeching, machines beeping. Sundar refused to leave her side. The nurses looked at him with mild curiosity, wondering why a man who looked like a CEO, dressed in the simplest cotton shirt, was so desperate to protect this old maid. But none of that mattered. Titles didn't matter in that moment. Only love did. They admitted her to room 12 that doctors said it was a minor heart attack. But she was severely anemic, exhausted, and malnourished. Her body, they explained, had simply been pushed too far. She should have stopped working years ago, one nurse said. Her body's been fighting silently. Sundar felt something in his chest collapse. He sat beside her for hours, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, watching the tubes and machines that kept her tethered to life. He ordered the best specialists, made calls to bring in the top cardiologists in the city. Nothing was too much now. He couldn't risk losing her. Not like this. Not when he had just found her again. That night, as Meenakshi slept under soft white blankets, Sundar sat on the window ledge and stared at the city lights. His mind drifted back in time. He remembered the rainy night when his father lost his job. The electricity had been cut, and they ate by candlelight. Meenakshi had shown up in the dark, holding 2 bags, one filled with rice, the other with dal. I just had extra, she had said. Even though everyone knew she hadn't eaten herself that day, he remembered the time he was bullied at school. And she walked all the way to the principal's office in her worn sandals to demand they protect him better. And he remembered, with painful clarity, the day he left for the United States. She hadn't come to the train station. He thought she was busy. But now, he realized she had probably stayed home because she couldn't bear to say goodbye. He clenched his fist. How many people had he forgotten on his way to success? How many? Hands had helped him rise while he never looked back. The next morning, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, and she saw him sitting there, holding a paper cup of coffee, his face worn with sleepless worry. You stayed? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not leaving you again, he said, reaching for her hand. A weak smile flickered on her lips. Don't be silly. I'm just an old woman. Your life is big now, Beta. Full of meetings and bright rooms. None of that matters if I lose the people who made me who I am. Her eyes filled with tears. He gently touched her forehead, just like she used to do when he was sick. Rest now, okay? No more cleaning, no more pain. I'm going to take care of everything. She closed her eyes, comforted by his words. But even as her breathing steadied, Sundar knew words weren't enough. He had to do more than offer comfort. He had to change something. For her. For all the people like her, forgotten, invisible, exhausted Dot later that day when she fell asleep again. Sundar stepped out into the hallway and made a call to one of his most trusted assistants. I need a full background check done on her life, he said. I want to know everything, where she lives, who she works for, what she earns, her medical history, everything. And do it discreetly. She can't know. The assistant hesitated. Sir, you want surveillance on an elderly maid? She's not a maid, Sundar said firmly. She's family. Within 24 hours, the report arrived. Thought it was worse than he thought. Meenakshi had been working 6 days a week, across 3 houses, traveling by foot. Her rent was unpaid for 3 months. She was behind on her electricity bill. Her diet consisted mostly of rice and boiled lentils meals. She stretched over 2 or even 3 days. She had visited the government hospital last month for chest pain, but couldn't afford the medicine they prescribed. She'd been turned away from 2 clinics because she had no insurance. There was also a file, filled with old pictures, yellowed photographs of Sundar's family, saved carefully in a tin box. She had kept them all these years. Sundar stared at the photos with a lump in his throat. Dot in one of them. He was 5, sitting on her lap. Both of them were laughing. His face was covered in birthday cake, and she was wiping it with her sari, smiling like he was her own child. How could he repay a lifetime of silent love? He closed the file and made another call. Get me the list of all the women in our city who are still working as domestic help above the age of 60. We're going to start something. In her name, sir, we're going to give them back their dignity, starting now. Back in room 12, Meenakshi slowly opened her eyes again. The light had shifted. A nurse was checking her pulse. Soft. Music played in the background. And then she saw Dot a small bouquet of jasmine beside her pillow. Dot with a note. Dot, you gave me the strength to dream. Now let me give you the peace to rest. Dot, she touched the flowers gently. They smelled like her childhood, like old temples, like the quiet mornings before the city woke up. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she didn't feel like just a maid. She felt seeing Dot, but outside the hospital. Not everyone was happy to have a powerful builder whose luxury apartment Meenakshi had cleaned for the past decade had just heard that she wouldn't be coming back. He wasn't happy that his maid had skipped a day without notice, and when he found out she was now connected to a billionaire, he made a call, track her, find out what's going on. And if she talks about me or what I did, shut her up. Because Meenakshi knew something that could ruin him. And now that Sundar was back in her life, the past was waking up. And not all of it was kind. Asterisk the truth in the shadows. Sky above Chennai turned a dull gray as clouds crept in, hanging low with the weight of a brewing storm. Inside the hospital, room 12 remained a calm island, shielded by the gentle hum of machines and the steady rhythm of Meenakshi's breathing. Sundar had barely left her side in days, his eyes tired, but his heart more awake than it had been. In years, each moment with her uncovered a layer of the past he didn't know he had forgotten. He brought her warm soup in a thermos and sat beside her, reading aloud from old Tamil poems she loved. Sometimes she would drift off mid-sentence, her frail body sinking deeper into the bed, but Sundar didn't mind. Being there, just sitting with her, made the world feel right again. He had missed something in all his years of chasing success, something pure, something grounding. Dot. And now he was starting to understand what it was. Dot. Meanwhile, a different kind of storm was gathering outside. Aaron Yetta, the real estate tycoon whose glass towers dotted the skyline of the city, sat in his lavish office flipping through a file on his desk. It was filled with photos of Sundar and Meenakshi at the hospital, taken secretly. Printed in black and white, cold, distant. Arun's jaw tightened. He remembered Mee and Hakshi had worked in his home for 12 years. She was always quiet, always obedient. Until that one time. The time she had spoken up. Back then, Arun's teenage son had been cruel, entitled, and reckless. He had thrown boiling water in the direction of another maid in a tantrum. Meenakshi had stepped in. She had pushed him aside, burned her own hands in the process. And then, when no one apologized, she did something unexpected. She reported the boy to a welfare officer. It almost made the news. But Arun had money. He silenced the agency with a bribe, threatened the officer with transfer, and fired Meenakshi on the spot. She left without protest. But Arun always wondered if she'd talk. Now, with Sundar Pichai by her side, the stakes had changed. If she ever breathed a word of what happened, it could destroy the carefully crafted empire he had built. Investors would flee. Public backlash would be brutal. He couldn't risk it. Dig deeper, Arun told his security chief. Find out what she's told him. If she's spoken about me, and if she has, take care of it cleanly. Back at the hospital, Sundar paced the corridor, speaking into his phone with quiet urgency. I don't want just donations, he said. We've done that before. They disappear. I want a program. A proper welfare initiative. Pensions, medical care, safe housing. Name it Project Meenakshi, and don't attach my name to it. This is about them, not me, his assistant on. The other end was stunned but obedient. Double quotes, yes, sir. We'll begin planning immediately. When he returned to the room, he found Meenakshi awake, her eyes watching the rain slip down the glass window. You always liked the rain, he said, sitting beside her. She smiled faintly. It reminds me of your mother's cooking. She used to fry pakoras when it poured. They sat in silence for a moment, wrapped in memory. Then she said something that caught him off guard. Do you know why I never came to visit after you left? He looked at her, unsure. I was ashamed, she whispered. After I was fired from the Meta House, some people started treating me differently. They said I was a troublemaker. I didn't want to bring any shame to your family, especially when you were doing so well. Sundar's hands balled into fists. What happened there? He asked gently. She looked away, hesitant. It's in the past. Not if it's still hurting you, he said softly. Please, tell me. And so she did. Slowly, painfully. In broken sentences and trembling sighs, she recounted what had happened. The scalding water, the other maid's scream, the silence. That followed, and how no one believed her when she said it was intentional. She had stepped up, knowing it could cost her everything, because she couldn't bear to watch injustice. Sundar listened, his jaw clenched in fury. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. Your family had too many dreams. I didn't want to dirty them. Tears stung his eyes. He stood up, paced the room, then suddenly turned to her. Do you want justice, Meenakshi, auntie? She looked at him for a long moment. I want no girl to go through what she did. I want those who think they can buy silence to know that we still have voices. Sundar nodded. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Get a legal team? I want every complaint ever made against Arun Mehta reviewed. Reopen any case that was closed. And bring me the name of the maid who was burned. Yes, sir. He hung up, then took her hand. We're going to fix this, he said. Not just for you, for everyone like you. That night, as the rain turned into thunder, Meenakshi slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Sundar sat by the window, eyes wide open, watching the storm. He wasn't afraid of it. He welcomed it, because sometimes the sky had to break to let the truth fall through. But across town, in a shadowy room lit by a single lamp, Arun Mehta was speaking into a phone. I want you to follow him. Track every move. If he goes public with this, we'll bury him in noise. Leak fake scandals. Pay off reporters. I don't care how big he is. No one ruins me. On the other end of the line, a man in a leather jacket nodded. Double quotes understood. And so, two worlds moved toward collision. One. Powered by truth and memory. The other. Fueled by fear and corruption. And in between them sat a woman with silver hair, sleeping softly under warm hospital lights, unaware that her quiet life had just become the spark of a coming fire. Asterisk. Echoes that won't stay buried. Storm finally passed sometime after midnight. The skies cleared slowly, leaving behind streets soaked in silence and the scent of wet earth. But inside the hospital, inside room 12, the air was far from still. Unseen by the world outside, a quiet revolution had begun, and its roots lay in the fragile breaths of an elderly woman who had once been forgotten. Me inikas. I slept peacefully. But her story was no longer asleep. In the corridor outside her room, Sundar sat with his laptop open, sleeves rolled up, face lit by the soft glow of the screen. He wasn't coding. He was reading a report had come in. One of his lawyers, after digging through public records and a few confidential files, had unearthed a buried complaint. It was a single-page document filed 12 years ago, stamped with dust and delay. The name on it was Pavitra, age 16. It detailed a severe burn caused by hot water thrown during a tantrum by Arun Mehta's teenage son. The maid, it said, had been rushed to a public hospital, treated, and then fired without compensation. The case had never made it past the complaint stage. The officer assigned to it had been transferred. The document had been marked resolved after 2 weeks. But it wasn't resolved. Not to Pavitra. Not to me in a case. Not to him. Tracer. Sundar said into his phone, I need to find Pavitra, no matter how long it takes. Sir, the assistant said cautiously, do you really want to stir this up now? Mehta has power. He has media reach, influence. You know how easily these things can be spun? That's exactly why we're going to stir it up. The line went quiet. As you wish, sir. Sundar closed the laptop and looked through the glass into room 12. Meenakshi's head had turned slightly. Her mouth moved in sleep. He wondered if she was dreaming of home, of the tiny courtyard in their old house where guava trees still leaned over the wall. He felt the weight of her years pressing down on him. 80 years. Thousands of days lived in the shadows. If he had come back sooner, maybe things would be different. Maybe he could have stopped her pain. Maybe no regret wouldn't help now. Only action would. He stood up and walked to the hospital's reception desk. I need a private security detail for room 12, he told them. 24 hours. Top priority. No one enters without my clearance. The receptionist blinked, clearly not used to that level of demand. But Sundar's voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had commanded boardrooms in 3 continents. She nodded without asking questions. Also, he added, I want to cover the medical bills for every patient in the cardiac ward today, anonymously. The woman stared at him, stunned. Sir, just do it quietly. No names, no press. He returned to the room as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in pink and gold. He sat by her bed, gently adjusting the blanket over her shoulder. Me, ENKS 8. Opened her eyes slowly. You didn't sleep? She asked. I'm catching up on years of not being here, he replied with a soft smile. She reached for his hand. Don't blame yourself. You didn't know. But now I do. And I'm not going to sit still. Her eyes welled up. You've grown into a good man, Sundar. He looked away, almost embarrassed. Because I had people like you to guide? But the peace of the morning would not last. Across town, a newsroom buzzed with activity. The editor of a prominent media house received an envelope slipped under his office door. Inside it was a flash drive. No sender. No note. When he plugged it into his computer, a video played. Grainy footage. A woman in a maid's uniform, hunched. Standing outside a large white bungalow. A voice shouted. Then a crash. Then a scream. Then Unmistakably, the image of boiling water spilling onto someone off screen. And finally, image of a man young, arrogant, smirking as a servant helped someone. Limp out of frame. The editor stared at the screen. This could destroy our own meta. And yet, 10 minutes later, his phone rang. Don't publish that video, came the voice on the other end. Who is this? Someone who's about to wire 5 million rupees to your personal account. The editor swallowed hard. You want it buried deep. The editor hesitated. And if I refuse, then your daughter's medical scholarship disappears. Your bank account gets audited. And your vacation house in Pondicherry, it burns. Click. The editor sat in silence. Then, slowly, he deleted the video. But not before making a copy. Because even the corrupt sometimes want to keep a door open. Meanwhile, Sundar's team made progress. They found Pavitra. She was 30 now, married with 2 kids, living in a slum outside of Chennai. She worked as a school cleaner, earning barely enough to survive. The scar on her arm had faded, but not the pain. When Sundar arrived at her doorstep, she didn't recognize him. Not at first. Are you the doctor? She asked. No, he said gently. My name is Sundar. I used to live in Besantnagar. You someone very dear to me, Meenakshi auntie. Her face changed. Meenakshi? She's alive? Yes, but she's been unwell. I'm helping her now. She told me about what happened to you. Pavitra's eyes fell. Please, she said quickly. I don't want trouble. They told me to forget it. They said if I ever spoke again, you're safe now, Sundar said. I promise I'll protect you. And if you're willing, we can bring the truth out together. Pavitra looked at him long and hard, then nodded. 2 days later, Sundar held a press conference. It wasn't fancy. No banners. No red carpet. Just a simple podium outside community hall. MENENA. I wasn't there. She was still resting, but Pavitra stood beside him. Her voice steady despite her fear. 12 years ago, she began. I was hurt by people who thought they were above the law. Today, I speak not for revenge, but for justice. The crowd was small but growing. And among them, hidden behind sunglasses and a scarf, was a woman with a press badge. She had the flash drive. She had the courage, and she was going to publish the story. But just as she stepped back to send the footage to her editor. Her phone was snatched from her hand. She turned. Too late. A man in black disappeared into the crowd. The story had just become dangerous. And Sundar had no idea. That the battle had only begun. Asterisk the story they tried to silence. Weight of the past had finally broken through the walls built to keep it hidden. And now the truth, once quiet, trembling, and buried beneath years of silence, was beginning to speak aloud. But as with any truth that threatens power, there were those working in the shadows, doing everything they could to shut it down. The day after the press conference, Pavitra's story made its way into whispers across the city. Though no major news channel had aired it yet, short clips from bystanders' phones had already spread on local social media. Someone had recorded Sundar standing beside her, calm and composed, his eyes reflecting not just conviction, but pain. Pain for what had been lost. For what could never be undone. In those 30 seconds of video, people saw something rare, power being used not to dominate, but to uplift. But not everyone was inspired. Some were afraid. In the boardroom of one of Chennai's most influential media groups, a battle was brewing. The journalist whose phone had been snatched, MEER, stormed into her editor's office with backup files of the stolen footage. She was done playing by silent rules. We've sat on stories like this for too long, she said, slamming the flash drive onto the table. This time, we tell it. The editor stared at her, torn between principle and pressure. Mira, you don't know what you're walking into. This isn't just a story, it's a war. Meta has people in government, police. If we run this, we all have targets on our backs. So what? She snapped. If an 80-year-old woman can carry the truth in her bones for decades, the least we can do is speak it. The editor sat in silence. Then slowly, he nodded. Get it ready. We go. Live at 6 p.m. Back at the hospital, Sundar sat beside Meenakshi, updating her gently about everything. Pavitra had spoken. People were listening. Her story was rippling through spaces that had ignored women like her for generations. Me, Ini, Kes, thinner now. Her skin like parchment, looked at him through watery eyes. I never imagined anyone would listen to us. They are now, Sundar said softly. Because you mattered. Because you always mattered? She reached for his hand, her fingers. Cold but steady. You've made me proud, Beta. A nurse entered just then, with fresh tea and a small tray of idyllis. Sundar smiled, knowing she had barely eaten the past few days. Only if you eat with me, she whispered. He nodded. Of course. As they broke the idyllis and dipped them in sambar, the room felt warmer, fuller. The world outside could wait, but the world wouldn't wait long. At exactly 6 p.m. The headline appeared across millions of screens. Exclusive. Billionaire's maid reveals hidden abuse. A story of silence, power, and courage. The article featured Pavitra's interview, court documents, and even older pictures of Meenakshi from when she was fired. The journalist had done her job. The truth was live. And within minutes, it went viral. HASGA began trending. #justice for MENA. #made no more. #silent noise. Beacon homes and cafes and buses and boardrooms. People read this story. Some cried. Some gasped. Some remembered their own household help and wondered what secrets they too might carry. But across the city, in a luxury bungalow wrapped in polished marble and pride, Arun Mehta stared at his television, the color draining. From his face, his phone buzzed nonstop, investors pulling out. Brand partners demanding statements. Lawyers warning that criminal investigations could be reopened. Even his oldest allies were turning cold. In that moment, he wasn't powerful. He was exposed. He hurled the remote across the room. Get that woman. He barked into the phone. Get that journalist. And if Sundar steps one more foot into this city, I swear I'll... But the threat didn't finish, because his office... Door opened without knocking. Two plainclothes officers stepped in, badges raised. Mr. Mehta, one of them said calmly. You're being summoned for questioning regarding multiple allegations of abuse, obstruction, and suppression of legal complaints. Mehta tried to protest. This is political. Do you know who I am? Yes, the officer said. And that's why we're here. As they led him away, cameras flashed outside. The same media houses he had once controlled now waited eagerly, microphones in hand, ready to report on his fall. Sundar watched the news break, live from the hospital. Me, N.A. Half asleep, turned toward the sound of his voice. Did something happen? She asked. He smiled gently. Yes, Annie, something good. The next few days moved fast. Government officials, feeling the public pressure, announced a new welfare scheme for elderly domestic workers. NGOs received sudden floods of donations. Pavitra was offered a safer job with benefits. Her children enrolled in a good school. Her husband cried quietly the night he saw her smile without fear for the first time. But amid the noise and change, Sundar knew he still had something left to do. He went to the same blue house where he had grown up. The paint had faded. The guava tree was still there, though smaller. He walked through the narrow lane, greeted by curious neighbors who recognized him. Now, from the news. And then he knocked on a small green door 2 houses away. An old woman opened it. Her back was bent, her sari faded, but her eyes were sharp. Yes? She asked. You used to sell tea to my mother every evening, Sundar said. I was just a boy then. Her eyes widened. You're... Sundar? He smiled. Yes. And you came back. For Meenakshi. Her eyes softened. She was always too good for this place. Yes, which is why I'm here. The next day, Sundar returned to the hospital with papers in his hands. Auntie, he said, placing them on her lap. This is your new home. Just a few lanes from where you grew up, with a courtyard. And a guava tree. Meenakshi blinked, confused. But I don't have money. You do now. he said gently. "And you never need to worry again." Her lips trembled. I don't know what to say. "Just rest," he said. "That's all I want now." But even as she smiled, grateful, a nurse entered with a worried face. "Sir," she said, "her vitals are fluctuating. We need to move her for observation." Sundar stood, heart tightening, .en, a case. I clutched his hand. "Don't go." "Never," he promised. But as the monitors beeped louder and nurses gathered round, he realized the fight for justice may be over, but the fight for her life was just beginning. Asterisk. The hands that built a legacy lights above the emergency room flickered slightly as the double doors slammed shut behind the nurses. Sundar stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the red "Do Not Enter" sign as if sheer willpower could make it disappear. Behind those doors, the woman who once carried him on her hip, who once mended his socks with trembling hands, who gave everything she had for the families she served, was now fighting her final battle, not against poverty, not against silence, but against time itself. His chest ached. It was the kind of pain that had nothing to do with physical injury, just the raw, helpless grief that came when you realized love alone could not stop the clock. Sundar felt as though the walls were pressing. In that moment, he wasn't a tech icon, a billionaire, or the CEO who had changed the world with innovation. He was just a boy again, sitting cross-legged on the floor, waiting for his Meenakshi auntie to finish telling him bedtime stories. And now, she might never tell another. He sat down slowly, fingers digging into the sleeves of his shirt. Across from him, in the corner of the corridor, Pavitra stood with her back to the wall, tears glistening in her eyes. She had come immediately when she heard. It didn't matter that her own scars had never fully healed. Meenakshi was more than a woman. To her, she was a symbol of resistance, of strength, of what it meant to stand up for someone when no one else would. The minutes dragged like hours. Finally, the doors opened. A young doctor stepped out, removing his gloves with slow, practiced motions. Sundar rose instantly, searching the man's face. "How is she?" The doctor hesitated, then exhaled. "She's stable. For now," he said. "Her heart is very weak, but she responded to treatment. She's conscious, but we need to keep her in intensive care. These next few hours are crucial." Sundar closed his eyes in silent relief. It wasn't over yet. "Can I see her?" "Only for a few minutes." Inside the room, it was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines. Meenakshi lay still, her skin pale, her lips slightly parted as she breathed. When Sundar entered, her eyes slowly fluttered open. "You stayed?" she whispered. He moved to her side and gently took her hand. "Always." "Did everything work out?" she asked, her voice thin like wind brushing silk. He nodded. "Yes. Pavitra's safe. Our Unmira is under investigation. The program we talked about, Project Meenakshi, it's already live. Hundreds of women like you are being registered for care, housing, and pensions. People are finally paying attention." She blinked, as if trying to grasp the magnitude of it. "You changed the world," he whispered. "Do you know that?" Tears slipped down her cheek. "I just wanted to clean homes, feed children, do good work. And you did," he said. "You did more than you'll ever know." She reached up weakly and placed a trembling hand on his cheek. "I'm proud of you, Sundar." He held it there, not wanting to let go. "I should have come sooner," he whispered, voice cracking. "I should have found you before you got sick." "No," she smiled faintly. "You came when it mattered." As he sat by her, she dozed off again, her chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm. Sundar stayed through the night, refusing to leave her side. And as the city outside went to sleep, he made a vow, not just to her, but to every forgotten hand that had labored in silence. They would not be invisible anymore. The following week, Sundar arranged a small ceremony. Not for press, not for applause, but for dignity. Inside a quiet community hall. Painted in soft earthy colors, a group of elderly women gathered, some with canes, others with worn hands and weathered saris. They were the ones who had built the foundations of countless homes who had cooked, cleaned, nursed, and held up generations. And today, they were being honored. Min in still fragile but determined, was wheeled into the room wearing a simple cream sari and a jasmine flower. Her hair? She looked around with wide eyes at the rows of women and the banners that read, Project Meenakshi, honoring the hands that built us. Sundar took the stage. Microphone in hand, voice steady, but filled with emotion. There are people who write history in books, and there are those who write it with their hands, he began. For too long, we've praised the builders of companies, nations, and ideas, while forgetting the women who quietly built our lives. He turned to Meenakshi. This initiative is not charity. It is long overdue justice. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, it was heartfelt. The kind that lingers in the soul. Each woman present was given a certificate of honor, a monthly pension, full healthcare coverage, and perhaps most importantly, a seat at the table. As Meenakshi watched others come forward, some weeping, some laughing in disbelief, she held Sundar's hand and whispered, I'm ready now. He turned to her, confused. Ready for what? To go home. And so they did. To her new house, a modest but beautiful home with wide windows, flowering plants, and a courtyard where a small guava tree had already been planted. Neighbors gathered to greet her. Pavitra's children ran around the tree, giggling. For the first time in years, Meenakshi sat in a swing in the sun, not as a worker, but as a woman finally at peace. In the evenings, Sundar would visit, sometimes alone, sometimes with his family. They'd sit on the veranda, sip tea, and talk about old days. She taught his children Tamil rhymes, told them stories of when Sundar was little. They laughed, they listened, and they learned what legacy truly meant. But time, as always, moved forward. A few months later, on a soft Sunday morning, with the sun casting long golden rays across the floor, Meenakshi passed away quietly in her sleep. There's no pain. No fear. Just peace. Just rest. Just completion. Her funeral was simple, as she would have wanted. But hundreds showed up. Neighbors, journalists, workers, old employers, and strangers who had seen her story online and been moved. Pavitra spoke. So did Sundar. And as they laid her to rest under the shade of her beloved guava tree, a breeze swept through the leaves, as if the world itself had paused to say goodbye. But the story didn't end there. Project Meenakshi expanded to over 10 states across India. It became a global model for labor justice. Sundar made sure her name was inscribed on every center built under the initiative. One plaque installed in the heart of Chennai read, in memory of Meenakshi. Cleaned homes, but left behind a legacy of justice, dignity, and love. And years later, when Sundar gave a speech at an international summit, he didn't talk about code, profit, or innovation. He told the story of a maid. An 80-year-old woman with silver hair and stronger hands than most men. A woman who worked in silence, but whose life spoke louder than any microphone. And when he finished, the room stood in silence. Then rose in applause. Because sometimes the greatest leaders aren't the ones with titles. They're the ones who gave everything they had just so others could stand. Asterisk.